That's a tasty beverage. Hi, friends. Welcome back. This is a delicious beverage. That's a delicious warm beverage. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you, Noah Lachlan, today, flying solo, because we've got some things to take care of, just some things to deal with. We've got things. Everybody's got things, and it's like a little housekeeping on some important items today. As everybody knows, we were really early in getting to the war in Ukraine. The day that Russia invaded Ukraine, we got an email from somebody that said, "Hey, I know a gentleman named Alex Dayrabekove who lives in Ukraine, and he would like to get the word out about what is happening to the people in Ukraine." And that was right when Russia came in, started bombing everything. And I'm like, absolutely. Totally. It was like day one or day two. I can't remember what day it was, but it was like when the first 2 days of the actual invasion, the genocidal invasion of Ukraine by the world's biggest piece of shit, Vladodolf Putler. And the gentleman that was put us in touch with a gentleman named Alex said, "Hey, friends of mine, love for you to talk to him." So we talked to Alex Dayrabekove that day. And that was like early in the war. That was when everybody was flooding aid into Ukraine because we all understood this was a war that was being fought on behalf of every Western country, every NATO country. We knew what was going on. And generally speaking, most people do. There's a small subset of people who somehow in their minds think that Vladodolf Putler is somehow justified and thinks it's a war against biolabs and it's for Jesus and for white nationalism and all the shit that every moron in the world lines up against and behind to try to convince you that we should just look away from what's going on in Ukraine. And then you add the war in Israel, as Gaza, Hamas, the terrorists decided to attack the fourth largest military in the world, now getting their asses kicked. But all that energy that we were putting into supporting the good people, men and women in Ukraine, seemed to have evaporated. And I think that was the whole point. So today we're back in Ukraine. We're back in Ukraine for a couple of reasons. Alex Dayrabekove joins us to talk about how this whole anti-Ukraine movement is spreading. We're going to give you a quick update of what's going on the ground. We're going to talk about the reality of what's going on and how Ukrainians look at Canada and how Ukrainians, by and large, our brothers and sisters, our agricultural brothers and sisters on the other side of the world, how they would feel about a Canadian government or a portion of Canadian government, how they do feel that wants to abandon the aid and abandon the help and abandon the effort in helping the people of Ukraine, because that is literally what's going on. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre voted the other day. This is, of course, if you're in Canada and you're joining us, and if you're a fan of international politics, Canada has a GOP arm. They've got the same MAGA idiots that exist in the United States on the right-hand side of the aisle here in Canada. They're called conservatives. And they, much like MAGA, is trying to do everything they can to help out their Christian national conservative friend, Vladimir Putin, in fisting the good people of Ukraine by taking away any aid or support they might get from other countries. And joining us to talk about that this morning, my friend and yours, please welcome back to the program, Mr. Alex Dayrabekove, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you. Huh? Look at that. Hands up, arms up, looking good. How are you, sir?
Hello,
you all right?
hello, my friend.
You good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as good as you can be in a war, I guess. I fucking hate asking you that every time I see you. I'm like, hey, how are things going?
Well, my face is even happier today because of the recent news. You probably heard it, that the EU starts negotiations of admitting Ukraine into EU membership.
Mm-hmm. And
Which
Moldova.
is,
That happened
and
today.
Moldova, yes, yeah, which is such a great news. I really did not expect it after all the news that I heard about Prime Minister of Hungary, Orban, who was backing up Russia, or backed up by Russia, and he played his bad game about not voting for that, but finally it resolved in a good way for us. So the door is open.
The door's open for Ukraine to finally join NATO, which is a big deal, right? Because you get the
EU.
protection of NATO, et cetera, et cetera.
That's EU. EU
EU,
at this point. Yeah, yeah,
EU
yeah,
to
yeah.
join the European Union. And that vote happened today, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken. Okay, and
yes.
they said yes, we're going to move towards admitting Ukraine and Moldova to the EU.
Yeah, actually, it's like the door is opened finally
Mhm.
after 2 years of this horrible war, and now it's of course a long process of Ukraine doing our homework into adjusting our legislation and everything to EU standards, and it will take at least 2-3 years. But
Okay.
but again, that's the start of the process, and it's already good because it's it's not so much even about EU. It's about the fact that we will get closer in terms of regulations, rules, policies, standards to European Union. It's good that we will. Well, the Ukrainian government will have to put enormous efforts into fighting with the corruption, which is big in our country.
Hmm.
But that's like an external push towards that. That's it's a good because EU will already invest a lot of dollars into the economy, and they will have to actually use the European money into helping us to standardize the legislation. So that's good from many sides.
Okay, so to explain to me why Ukrainians are excited, because NATO, big push to get into NATO, obviously that was a big one, and then there's obviously the push to get into EU, the European Union. Why is that important? Is it about having policy that's on the mark with the rest of Europe and some of those European countries, access to monetary funds and that kind of stuff? Why is that such an important step for Ukraine, Alex, in your
Well,
opinion?
actually, it's quite a long story. We started this journey basically we started 20 years ago with the first revolution, and then since 2007 we started the process into EU association. That was the
Yeah.
first step. It took us several years to adjust our legislation according to the standards of EU association. Then we had the second Maidan in 2013.
Hmm.
That was actually about the fact that the president, who at that point, Yanukovych, at some point stopped the process of EU association, and the people raised, and Yanukovych had to leave. And then it took us another 10 years to actually uh, push EU and ask them to open the door for us. And only when the full-scale invasion started last year, EU finally said, okay, do your homework, and then we will see whether we will open this door or not. And today is a very historic day for us,
Hmm. Yeah.
because
Oh,
we've been going through not just years, but like decades.
yeah.
Yeah.
Decades of trying to get into the EU. Yeah. You know what? And it's interesting because in terms of like, access, I think it being in the EU gives you access to all kinds of security that the EU provides a lot of their partners, not just monetary security. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, right, and also lots of other things. Like, just to give you a practical example,
Yeah.
when I traveled to Hungary about 7 years ago, I was so impressed with their highways. I would not imagine an ex. Well, Hungary used to be a country in the Soviet bloc, right? So I would not imagine how a Hungary could have such great highways. I was driving my car from Budapest to Vienna, and the road in Hungary was like extremely good. It was like brand new, everything so new and great. Then when I entered Austria, it was a lot worse. And I was impressed, and I was asking people, and then turned out that Hungary, when they entered EU, they got lots of finance from EU into their infrastructure, which
Hmm.
was old, post-Soviet style.
Hmm.
And EU actually invested dollars into completely rebuilding their infrastructure. So we will expect the same. I'm sure EU will be interested in investing like dozens of billions of dollars into Ukrainian infrastructure, and And as you said in the introduction, we are one of the biggest agricultural countries in the world, and number one by some agricultural things like sunflower, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the infrastructure is very important for us to transport this to Europe. So just as one of the examples, and there's so many more others.
Yeah, updating infrastructure, money to update, money to get things to and from places, whether it's ports of call, whether it's whatever it is. And I mean, if there's any area in the world that's going to need some infrastructure updating right now, it's going to be Ukraine, which brings me to the aid portion of the conversation. You've been heavily subsidized by a bunch of Western allies and always celebrated the subsidization of aid, military equipment, weapons, the things that you have needed and begged for, whether they be HIMARS, whether they be cluster munitions, which when they go off on behalf of the allies and the Ukrainian people, I get excited by those videos, by the way. Even though they're not allowed, but against the orcs, I happen to think they should be. But it started to, people are starting to push back, right? And when I say people, I mean really hardline alt-right conservatives that align with, and you mentioned them earlier, people in Europe like Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban, of course, very tight with Vladimir Putin. Viktor Orban had tried to give you the Heisman to get into the EU. He's now going country to country that is giving aid to Ukraine and begging them to stop, asking them to quit helping out the people of Ukraine. Happened here in Canada this week, where that narrative is starting to catch fire with those same groups with the same ideological bent, meaning that Christian nationalist movement. Here in Canada, it's the Conservatives. In the United States, it's MAGA or the GOP or Republicans, if you will. And real quick, I wanted to get your take on that. I wanted to get your take on the narrative as you sit in your condo in a suburb of Kyiv. Irpin is where you're from. As bombs were going off the other night, and you hear these air raid signals all the time, daily, as you live there with your wife and your son, as you document hundreds of examples of torture, rape, murder for the international criminal courts. And as you've seen the destruction in your country of basic infrastructure, entire towns and cities in the east, your hometown of Irpin, which was liberated early. What do you make of the narrative? Not where it comes from, because we know where it comes from. It comes from Vladimir Putin and his apologist bullshit. But like, what do you think when you interact with a tweet like the one you interacted with today about Vladimir Putin, where Pierre Poilievre here in our country says no more aid for Ukraine, voted down a free trade aid package, which we were trying to get to you this week. You said, why doesn't Pierre come over here and see for himself? Faraway land. He said, we don't belong in faraway lands like Ukraine. It will become very close if he just comes, but he won't. I want you to talk about it unfettered, because you're in Ukraine, you're live. You and I are very good friends. We have played out this narrative. You've partaken in the understanding of what parts of the narrative are here on behalf of conservative, voters or people that align with Vladimir Putin, which is what they're trying to do. That's all. That's just a hat tip to Vlad, by the way, here in Canada, on behalf of the party that supports those talking points. But I want your thoughts, Alex.
Well, thank you. This is exactly what you are talking about. I hear this narrative every now and then, everywhere in Europe and the States and Canada. And before you explained, I had no idea who this Pierre was. Not so much aware about Canadian politics, but when I read it, I got so emotional. I was like, well, this is clearly a narrative that is just repeating as a parrot. But what kind of argument can be against this? Just come over and see it. Same with Elon Musk. He's speaking some bullshit, and finally he made his way to Israel to actually see it on his own eyes. I once messaged under one of his posts that come over here to Ukraine. I will show you around, so that they should know. And I'm glad to those people who actually come over. By the way, today a delegation from Indonesia, which is like, I mean, they're physically far away from us. They came over and to Bucha, and Bucha was known in the beginning of the war for the atrocities that happened there. 500 people were killed, and they made it to come and see it on their own eyes, So, but this is a narrative. We have to fight with it.
How do you? So I'll play you the clip. I'll play you the clip of Pierre Poilievre. Now, this gentleman is you're going to hate him right off the bat because you can tell he's just a little shit. And he's universally hated here, but he's captured the MAGA imagination of really stupid people in this country. And trust me, we got lots, like plenty. But I want to play you the clip, and I want you to listen to what he says about Ukraine real quick.
People say they'll never be able to afford a home. We understand with this miserable record, he doesn't want to talk about Canada or Canadians. He'd rather spread falsehood about faraway foreign lands, Mr. Speaker. Will he not stand up for once for Canada, axe the tax so our families can...
Yeah.
Your thoughts? Faraway land, falsehoods about supporting Ukraine.
And how is that?
That's Pierre. Him? That's your boy, Pierre. Yeah. Who's that?
I mean, what can I say?
What do you say?
It's so hard, and I talked to an eyewitness today who was actually captured and held captive for 22 days in Russian prison in the occupied lands. And she wasn't tortured, but she was beaten. A lady, she was beaten on her head with a sack on her head, and then they deported her to the mainland of Ukraine. Before the deportation, they read a sentence to her that, by the law of Russia or whatever, we are deporting you, and they filmed it, and they ordered her to say "Glory to Russia." And this lady, after 22 days of being imprisoned and under the threat of being killed, basically, refused to say "Glory to Russia." I mean, when I heard it, and I hear it all the time from the witnesses, and sometimes they do not even understand how brave they are, how courageous they are, because they take it for granted. This is just, she could not say that. She could not say "Glory to Russia," even under the threat of death. I don't want to think about this guy, whatever bullshit he says. I want to think about those people who are so brave and courageous. They are ready to lose their lives, but not for the aggressor.
Yeah, I'd rather talk about those people too. But it's one of those things, right, that needs to be taken care of over here, and to have you over there documenting these stories and talking to the people that these atrocities were committed against, and collecting money and food to go and feed not just soldiers, but men, women, children who are locked in their house in war-torn portions of your country. The idea that Canada, or the United States for that matter, right, depending on who wins what election, how those supports can change, and I think that if you were to ask me, knowing you, and being able to kind of see inside your country thanks to you, and so not just the atrocities, but the amount of suffering that goes on there, it's got to worry smarter folks like yourself, right? that there are free countries around the world that are standing shoulder to shoulder, like Canada has, like the United States has, against Vladimir Putin for the people of Ukraine. And, you've got enough on your plate to worry about when you hear this kind of rhetoric and you respond to it, even on Twitter, which you responded in my timeline. It's got to give the rest of the people in Ukraine just another negative to consider, depending on that information war, like who's going to win that and how it's going to get won. And here's the thing, Alex, I don't know. I don't know that many people in Canada or the United States that aren't pro-Ukraine or pro-aid or, anti-genocide. I don't know that they understand what's at stake, and I think that that is, one of the biggest issues as I see today. I walk around, talk to people about, but it's not like I walk around just talking to people about the war. But when you run into people and it comes up as a subject, most of me, all of me, can't believe that there's an alternative to supporting Ukraine, right? Like I think because I have the benefit of knowing you, and not being subject to that fire hose of disinformation that comes out of Russia or countries that are sympathetic to what Russia wants. I think that's my added advantage. But I was shocked this week to see some of the people agreeing with him. I'm shocked to see anybody, to be honest with you. And it must shock you because you document these cases where you're like, how can you possibly be pro that when I've been dealing with this all day?
Right.
Well,
there's no alternative, as we know.
No. And it's frustrating for me, and I can't imagine how frustrating it is for you. At the same time, we're not, at least I'm not, under any illusion as to what's going on. And it's funny because you bring up the one thing, well, Russia invaded Ukraine. Like, do you not understand that? And it's the same answer that you get from all the Putin apologists. If you hear it, it's like, what, you want more people to die? Right? It's like, well, they didn't do it. They didn't attack you. You attacked them. That's what you did. And they're like, yeah, but it's over now. It's over. Is it the same messaging that gets pumped into Ukraine as we get here? Which is like, oh, that's it. The Ukraine doesn't want peace. They're going to continue to fight. They just want to continue to, that. Is it the same kind of information that gets pumped into your country as the bullshit we see here?
Well, frustration is the word that's probably that characterizes what is going on in the information space within the past month or so.
Yeah.
As we know, the counteroffensive failed. That was publicly acknowledged. The president said about that. The Washington Post wrote about that. But there has been quite a lot of bad news, and those narratives are more and more in the space that, okay, we got to negotiate or whatever. There's nothing to negotiate. How do you negotiate with a bear that comes and wants to kill you? No way. We should negotiate with him. We should fight. And I just gave you this example of this lady. This is a lady, a fragile lady who was not ready to say glory to Russia, even under the threat of death. And the Ukrainians are like her. Like, we are all like her. Even without weapons, without money, we will continue fighting. I think President said this week something like, I never heard things like this since the invasion started. But he mentioned something like, we are ready to fight like partisans. So
Zelensky said that?
Yeah, I think he said somewhere. So I think he mentioned that just to underline the fact that even without weapons, without money, we will continue fighting, even if if the Russians offensive, and there's a huge offensive within the past weeks, and they are gaining our land. Let's be honest. And if they continue gaining our land, we will continue fighting. Even if they get Kyiv, we will continue fighting.
Do you think that, because obviously there's been an uptick in attacks, right? And there was one the other day in Kyiv, if I'm not mistaken.
You mean the rocket attacks?
Yeah, yeah.
We had 3 air raid sirens today. By the way, we heard an explosion. There was a Kinjal. It was a hypersonic missile rocket that was shot down by a Patriot, and the explosion was so loud. I probably never heard any explosions of this kind since the invasion. It was somewhere over Kiev, and I'm like 10 miles away from Kiev. So that was quite loud.
And it's still going on. Yeah. We just get like muted reports of it, obviously now. But again, this is what people don't understand. That it is not just still going on, but that Russia has gained ground in certain aspects, specifically in the east, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I think they've taken back some decent sized portions in the south as well. Is it how's the mood of the Ukrainian people today? I mean, because it's, if you're not dealing with the vacuum in Israel, you're dealing with partisan bullshit around the world. And obviously, with the spring offensive not being as significant as you thought it would be, and then Russia being able to push back a little bit in the winter. I don't even know where they're getting their people from. I read today like 315,000 Russians have been taken out of commission, if I'm not mistaken, since the start of this war. And they originally amassed 300,000 to go in to Ukraine at the beginning. So it's like 15,000 more than they had allotted actually for the original invasion that you've taken out. How are things going? Like, what's your update?
I'd say in one word, tired.
Yeah.
We are tired. And by the way, yesterday, the day before yesterday, when Zelensky went to the States, Russian hackers attacked number 1 mobile operator in Ukraine. And just imagine the biggest mobile operator. Who is the biggest mobile operator in Canada?
Bell Canada.
Bell Canada. Okay, yeah. So let's be Bell Canada. Bell Canada is completely down. Like no voice messages, no internet. It's just completely down. I couldn't call my mom. My mom couldn't connect on internet, so for a day or so I could not know what is going on with my mom. My mom is quite old. She's 73 years old now, and my dad is a disabled guy, and whatever can happen to them, they cannot even call an ambulance. And this is everywhere. Like 20 million people for 40 hours could not have any mobile connection on internet. And stores could not, some of the stores could not accept card payments, only cash. So it just like so inconvenient. And they specifically intentionally did it. And that is confirmed now that it was done by Russian intelligence service. So things like this happen, and then we are already kind of exhausted and tired and frustrated. And this is why I was smiling, because the news about EU membership opening negotiations is such a great thing on the background of all those bad news around us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, tired is such a great way to explain it, right? It is, I'm reminded, of how stupid people are when I listen to you talk about being tired of having people drop bombs in your neighborhood, tired of documenting war crimes, torture, rape, tired of living under the constant occupation of another country, and I find it wild, because I think over here we could easily say, well, we're on side X or we're on side Y, but we don't take your experience into account. We just take our opinions into account, which is, what I see all the time. I can't help but see it. It is nonstop. I put this up today. Pierre Poilievre just told my friend Alex, my Ukrainian friend Alex Dayrabekove, to come to Canada to see what Trudeau has done to the country. This is a supporter. He says to you, why don't you come over here and see what Trudeau has done to our country? Then you will understand why we have nothing to give you. Said to a tired, war-torn person when there's no war in this country, just, speaks volumes to me anyway. And I know you probably don't take idiots like that seriously, but when you're exhausted and you read that, that can't be a good feeling, Alex.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you're sick with cancer, and somebody says, "Oh, you don't know what a headache is." Yeah, of course I don't.
You might have cancer. You might have terminal cancer. You might be bedridden. But do you know what it's like to not get your Uber delivery on time?
Not having a beer? A spare beer in your fridge on a Friday night?
Yeah. You listen, you might be under constant bombardment by a criminal enterprise and dictatorship all the time. But I just ran out of Lucky Strike beer, and I'm going to have to go all the way down to the store to get some. Do you know what that's like? You know how hard that is? I mean, thank God you're laughing, right? Because that just fucking infuriated me this morning. I'm like, you piece of shit, you entitled asshole. But that's really what it comes down to, right? And thank God Lachlan's not here, because he would tell you how tough it was for him to get to work this morning because he didn't get the right scooter, the right e-scooter. Or the bike lanes have been a real oppressive thing to him where he's from. But I mean, that's the narrative. I mean, that's how dumb these people are, right? It's almost, and you can't do anything but laugh. Like, I get mad for you, but you must have seen this so much where you're like, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, United States of America. Let's go over and see how bad things are in Los Angeles right now, as opposed to Donetsk, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's I feel lucky. I feel happy. In fact, when I hear, to your point, when I listen to the stories from those victims and witnesses of war crimes, every time I feel like I'm so lucky. I'm so happy that nothing of the kind happened to me and my family. Believe it or not, a post taste I have after those very difficult conversations. Sometimes I really cry after them. There were times I could just hug my wife and I would cry, because there's unheard of. Some stories are unheard of.
Well, I just want any of those people that you've talked to that have told stories of being captured, abused, raped, tortured. I want you to let them know that guy is really upset that he's got to pay an extra 0.03 cents on every tax dollar that he has to give to the government. I just want you to know it's ruined him. And he wants you to know, while you're dodging bullets and bombs, that gas is just a little more expensive over here. Okay? And I hope you have empathy for him. I hope you feel sorry for him. And I'm sorry, and that's the other thing. I on behalf of, and I hope that the people of Ukraine don't hate us because of one guy and one party. I really do. I really do.
I remain silent.
I don't want you to remain silent. That's the thing, is that, he, part of this is like, I've got this incredible sense of pride, Alex, about the support that we've given Canada, and how Ukrainians get excited to know that Canada's all in, right? Because we have a massive Ukrainian diaspora here in Canada, one of the biggest in the world, obviously, specifically in Western Canada. And the Ukrainian Congress, the biggest Ukrainian organization in Canada, begged those guys to support that bill, the free trade bill, begged them to not stand up against the aid. And they did it anyway. They're doing it anyway. We're going to shove that stuff through anyway, because we've got enough support that we can do that. And that's how the parliamentary system in Canada works. But, it is, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that he represents any part of Canada and he's in the lead in the polls, which is starting to scare people. I don't know if that translates over there. I don't know if anybody, like, you didn't know who the guy was other than tweeting about him. But I mean, it's, again, got to be scary for you.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, just like the fight between Democrats and Republicans, just like the Orban part, just like anything. My wife recently said that she almost cried. She said, like, how in the world is it possible? So many countries are helping Ukraine. Well, because yes, we do receive a lot of help. It's not enough, but it's a lot of help. And it's modern equipment, modern technologies, like lots of money, billions of dollars. Uh, and Russia is sanctioned. Russia is tightly, you know, grasped by the sanctions, and for some reason, Russians are still attacking us and continuing the offensive. How is it possible? It clearly is obvious that it's not enough. The help that we are getting is not enough.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we need more help in order to win.
Did you see his speech, Putin's speech this morning at all?
I heard some of the parts of that.
Yeah.
He said Odessa is a Russian city. Last night they sent like dozens of drones to Odessa, and today he's saying that Odessa is a Russian city.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. No,
it's
he's
just such a bullshit. I mean,
yeah, he's a piece of shit. He said this. He also said, and I found this interesting. Confident that Western military support is drying up. He said Ukraine produces almost nothing today. Everything is coming from the West, but the free stuff is going to run out someday. And it seems it already is. Again, that's on the back of a couple of political parties in countries that are very, very friendly, like the United States and Canada, saying that, maybe we should stop sending anything over there, right? I mean, he also made, I'm pretty sure he made like an anal sex joke in there. I think he made a couple of other he made a couple anti-Semitic digs. I think he made another homophobic dig during his speech as well. And that, I tell you what, over here, that tracks with that group, that tracks with those overly conservative, religious zealots, right? Which is amazing to me, because if you're a progressive individual and you watched any of it or you had any of it transcribed, um, it's not hard to look at that guy and go, oh, he's clearly fucking insane, and he's clearly mean. Like, he's clearly not, you know what I mean? Like, just even going through the language that he used, which I did. I went through the entire transcript today, and it was like, I'm pretty sure it was like a 4 hour,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, he was up there for 4 hours, and I read parts of the transcript, but it was all bullshit, and it was all designed for himself, and it was all. I mean, it's amazing to me still that Russian men and women are having their kids literally pulled out of their houses and getting sent into the meat grinder, and they're like, yeah, the guy's onto something.
yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah, and it speaks of the traditional values, and you mentioned conservative ideology, kind of, but there's nothing about traditional values. To give you to give you this example of the witness I talked to today, she was released from the prison. Well, she was in the first place, she was detained because she was sending coordinates of the Russian military equipment to the Ukrainian armed forces.
Boss move.
So so she was detained and kept for 22 days. And then, miraculously, she was released and deported to the Ukrainian mainland. Only months later, she actually found out that her parents paid money to the Russians. So there's not, okay, just imagine a situation when you detain someone who is helping the enemy's army. What would you do? You would keep that person, probably exchange as a prisoner of war. No, there is a corruption. There is a huge corrupt organism in Russia. There is nothing about traditional values. The only traditional value they have is money. Nothing else. And this is just a cover. Traditional values, men, women, no non-traditional relations. That is all bullshit. this is all about money.
Always
I
has
don't
been,
know.
right?
Yeah,
It always has been. It's always been about money. You're right. I mean, if they're a Christian society, a lot of their Christian soldiers raped and tortured a whole bunch of Ukrainian people. That Christian society kidnapped 20,000 Ukrainian children. I mean, those are not traditional values, to your point. And also to your point, they will do anything for a dollar, right? Like, absolutely.
yeah,
They're just barbarians. That's all they are,
yeah, yeah. Uh,
to your
I,
point.
yeah, I read a post on some Telegram channel about a Russian who had 5 children and a wife who was on maternity leave, and they did not have money. So what he did, he went to the war with Ukraine to earn money. I mean, this is just one example, but there's millions of them. They they are poor people who have nothing to do as to go earn some money. Like I think I posted on Twitter, Ukrainians recently captured a guy from Nepal, a citizen of Nepal, a student from Nepal who studied in a Russian university, who had no money, and he was offered to go and fight on their side against Ukraine. So he went to the front line, and then 1.5 months later he was captured by Ukrainians. He was detained by Ukrainians. So they promised him something like $2,000 or $3,000 per month, but in fact they paid like $100 or something. I mean,
So they're
this
being
is
lied to.
universal.
Yeah.
Universal.
That's what Putin's doing. Like, he's going country to country looking for people, right? He's taking people out of not just prisons, but he's taking immigrants and foreign workers, and he's promising them the moon, and he's just sending them into the meat grinder, like continually sending them into the meat grinder, and then shortchanging them.
Yeah.
Say, I'll give you like $2-3 grand, but he's giving them $100.
Yeah, and then they die, and then okay, they take new ones.
Yeah.
So it's quite a good business model, like good. I mean, another thing that a friend of mine told me that opened my eyes a couple of years ago, before even the invasion. The thing is that in Russia they build up a strong mortgage system, so the people would buy real estate, get mortgage, and then they would stick to a workplace because if they lose their work, they will not be able to pay mortgage. Then the crisis came, the COVID came, and lots of people actually lost the job. And there's so many, so many poor people in Russia who are still paying mortgage. So the mortgage is on a very high level in Russia, and because of that, lots of people really have to go and earn money somewhere. So another source of meat for those meat grinders, for them.
Wow. Yeah, you know what? And I've heard those stories too. I've also heard my son's girlfriend is from Kyiv, which and her grandmother is in Crimea, Russian-occupied Crimea. So Russia recently went into her home, removed her from her house, and gave her home to a Russian national. So they're going around Crimea. Anybody who is Ukrainian that can't prove that, and that the ownership of the house is in the daughter's name, the daughter is in a different country, grandmother is living in the house, and they're like, hey, listen, these are our Russian homes now because this is Russian territory. They're removing. This is from my son's girlfriend who talked to her grandmother the other day and was telling me this story. Grandmother's in her 70s, no place to live. Now she's trying to get back into Ukraine from Crimea and cannot. Right? So they're literally taking homes that belong to Ukrainians under specific circumstances and just giving them to Russian officers, Russian nationals, or people they think are more deserving of that land who are Russian or are loyal to Russia. And this grandmother has never spoken out because she's obviously afraid, right? She lives in Russian-occupied Crimea. She lives Spartanly. She goes to the store. She gets her cookies, her tea, her vegetables on a somewhat daily basis, comes back and has lived there for several years. And now, because, her family are Ukrainian nationals, they can't go back and don't want to go back to Crimea. They're like, hey, you live there. And now Russians literally have come in to remove her from her home, and they've given that home to somebody else. So it's just another story, if you will. I don't know if you've heard those stories as well.
No, not like this. Well, my in-laws moved out of the territories that were occupied about a month after they left in the east of Ukraine. And Chechens, Kadyrovцы, the ones that are the private army of Kadyrov, the president of Chechnya, they came and they actually occupied some of the apartments. And my mother-in-law called us and was crying that they could also take her apartment, And of course, she didn't want that. Luckily, they didn't get in because the neighbor said that they will come back very soon, and they are on their way somewhere. Wait a bit, and then they got lost. I don't know where they went. Hopefully, they are dead or something. I don't know. But recently, we also heard that in this is a little city, like 6,000 people, and we recently heard that there is no electricity and no water, and people like grumbling there in the Telegram groups that, oh, what is the authorities doing? And most of those who stayed are very pro-Russian. And they actually waited for the Russian world to come, and they are supposed to be very happy. And now they have no electricity, no heating, no water, and they're like, "Oh, it's winter outside. Why don't we get electricity or water?" And my wife said, "Well, and they don't say that under Ukraine they had never had anything of the kind. They always had electricity, always had water." Always had heating.
Yeah.
The Russian world came, deprived them of everything.
Yeah. Well, those stories, those are like, it's not just in that village. Those stories are everywhere, right? Where Russians came in as the great liberators, and not only does the electricity and the water not work, there's no food. There's martial law in every town. I mean, they're burning books, they're looting museums. It's all the same thing. You hear it all the time. But it's just amazing to get firsthand stories, right? To hear it from people. Like I was shocked when my son's girlfriend was telling me that story. And, I believe it, obviously, because it's happening to her and it's happening to her family. And I think, beyond the cavalcade of stories that I've heard from you and other stories that have been vetted, again, I go back to the idea that it is impossible to think that we don't have a responsibility to help. Right. It is impossible to think that, the free world, democratic nations who want the same thing for the people of Ukraine, which is a free Ukraine and free people in Ukraine, believe that it's not our job, responsibility, and duty to help the people of Ukraine. So just even getting some stories from you about, and I mean, we go through these stories every time you're on. But stories from you, firsthand stories of the pride of the people of Ukraine and how bad it is in certain aspects. Again, I'm embarrassed. And it was funny because when Pierre said that, and then that became like a front page story here in Canada, which it is. I was like, man, I hope Alex doesn't see this. I know, I was seriously. I was like, I hope he's not mad. Like, because it's just another thing, right?
Oh, that I'm as a citizen, I appreciate so much your support. I mean, your personal support. Everyone I know, the support from Canada, Canadians, everyone who helps us. That's a real friendly and true support in a democratic environment. And the fact that Pierre is saying this is only a proof that this is a democratic environment. But as for the States and for the Great Britain, it's a different story. We all think, and we are accustomed to think that, okay, what is the difference? Yeah, UK, US are helping whenever they can, and they have the right to help, and they are using this right. That's not right. They have the obligation. UK and the US have the obligation to help Ukraine unlike Canada, for example. Why? Because in 1994, there was a Budapest Memorandum signed in Budapest when Ukraine deprived of, or we voluntarily gave away our nuclear weapons to Russia in exchange for security guarantees. And I don't know if you heard of that, but this is something that Russia, UK, and US actually guaranteed security to us. Russia attacked us, UK and the US have an obligation to not just support, but to protect us. Well, we do not ask for the manpower or for the soldiers. We just ask for money and for the weapons. They have to give us.
The Budapest Accord. I'm going to have to read up on that. I'm aware of it, but I wasn't aware that Russia signed it as well.
Yes.
I knew UK and they did. Yeah. So they well, true to their word always, aren't they?
Yeah. Obama actually came to Ukraine and participated in I think it was some aircraft, military aircraft that was basically destroyed. That was used for nuclear arsenal.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, yeah. There's just more reasons. I mean, you're just giving me more reasons for us to support you. That's all.
Yeah, but that's just nobody talks about that. I don't know why, because it's probably some consensus or some agreement that we shouldn't speak. I mean, the politicians shouldn't speak publicly about that. So Zelensky, in the beginning, he would mention that, and then he stopped mentioning it.
Yeah, the Budapest Accord. Yeah. You're right. He did, didn't he? I remember when he started talking about that at the start. He's like, "Well, you got to help." And then he's not talking about it anymore, obviously, because he's moved on to other things. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, but overall, it looks like I just have a thought that well, we all think that democracy is better than tyranny, but it looks like in this war, the tyranny is winning.
Yeah. Well, they're winning the information war, right? Like that, and then I think that's the area where we can affect some change. Is in the pushing back against the people, noticing their intentions. One of the things that drives me crazy, is that that people are allowed to have an opinion alternative to genocide. Like, you know what I mean? It's that no, well, let's invent a new narrative and let's paint Ukraine as the bad people, biolabs, and they invent all kinds of bullshit just to be able to justify whatever narrative they would like to support that's anti-Ukraine. But in the end, it always comes down to the same thing, right? Which is anti-democratic. It's anti-democracy. It's the one thing, the underpinning of why we support Ukraine, why the Western world supports Ukraine, is because choice is important. And Ukrainian people would like that choice. I mean, you've been fighting for it for decades and decades and decades. And more specifically in the last 20 years and in the last 8-9 years, it is this isn't a war, as you point out, that started, a year and a half or almost 2 years ago now. This is a war that started years and years and years ago with the revolution. And if it continues, right, if this war continues, it becomes, unfortunately, one of those things that we just accept, like, Afghanistan or Iraq. You're like, oh yeah, we're over there, right? Oh yeah, we're just supporting that war. But I don't think people understand what's at stake for the rest of the world, right? And in Poland, I don't know if you saw the Polish prime minister come out and basically say, hey, the Western world has to send everything to Ukraine right now, because if it's just Ukraine, we're all next. But it doesn't stop there, does it?
Yeah. And I'm so thankful. Donald is such a great guy, and it's so cool to see him back in the real politics. And he's a true friend of Ukraine, and I'm sure that he is. And by the way, Poland also had some problems with stepping away from democracy. And the fact that Donald Tusk is prime minister now is the victory of democracy in Poland.
Yeah, it is. And I hope that democratic sort of left-leaning or, global responsible citizen. I hope that we continue to have those in North America as well, Alex. It was really, really, really nice to see you. Really good to see you as always. Good to see your smiling face. I hope you appreciate the nice Christmas writing where your name is on the screen too. We got
Oh,
that in
yeah.
just for you. Yeah, yeah. Merry Christmas. Do you have plans for Christmas, or are you just gonna hide and duck?
By the way, we will have first ever in our history the Christmas Orthodox Christmas combined with the Catholic Christmas on the same day, because historically we used to celebrate it on January 7th.
Yeah.
And this year, and then it was like both January 7th and December 25th.
Yeah.
And this year's January 7th is completely cancelled because it is really pro-Russian way of celebrating.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We have so many changes connected to that. Yeah. Like, yeah, we are stepping away from all Russian, and we can talk about it at some later shows. But 25th of December is really the holiday that is uniting us with Europe, with the Western world, with the Western civilization. So
that's a big move. That's a big FU to Putin, isn't it? In Russia, where you're like, hey, by the way, Russian Christmas totally canceled forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should make it illegal.
Oh, yeah.
You should make it illegal to celebrate Christmas on January 7th now. I didn't know that. Good for you guys. You're taking Christmas back. All right.
Yes. We're becoming normal.
I always found that weird, too. I remember last year, you're like, yeah, we get 2 Christmases. I'm like, that's weird. Cool if you like a lot of gifts, but kind of weird. So the fact that I didn't know that it was Russian in heritage, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Merry Christmas.
All right, there you have it, Alex from Ukraine. They've taken away Russian Christmases altogether. It's all Ukrainian Christmas, December 25th this year. I'm going to celebrate with you. We're going to FaceTime on Christmas Day this year, and we're just doing the one. I'm doing Ukrainian Canadian Christmas this year. That's what I'm doing. So I'll make sure I celebrate with you. Great to see you, buddy. As always, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to us today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Give Alex a follow at Dayrabekove on Twitter, Alex Dayrabekove. You can find on Facebook as well. And there you have it. There you have it. A gentleman, a real gentleman, a man who's been fighting against actual tyranny for the past 2 years in Kyiv, who's had to live globally and go from town to town. Sometimes electricity, sometimes not. Sometimes food, sometimes not. Sometimes running water, sometimes not. Who's had to go back to his home to have it ransacked by Russian orcs. Who's been dodging death for the past 2 years. With a comment on Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party deciding in their infinite wisdom to take the side of the man who's delivered that genocide onto him and his friends and his family. What a fucking embarrassment. Legitimately. Like just a full-on Canadian embarrassment. That's what the Conservative Party of Canada is. That's what Pierre Poilievre is, who sets the tone for that party. If you're a conservative, you should probably take your culture back. Just go back to counting pennies, being entrepreneurs, side with the rest of the ideologues on the right side of this equation. Keep that money flowing into Ukraine. Keep that aid moving into Ukraine, because it's not just about Ukraine. This is about democracy. This is about freedom. This is about the bullshit that is borderless, whether it's disinformation or misinformation, the kind of hatred that Pierre Poilievre farmed when he said, we're done with Ukraine. It's a faraway land. Really? There's like 400,000 or 500,000 people that are direct descendants from that faraway land that are begging this country to continue to help. You're going to work against them. You're going to work against Alex, his 2-year-old Artie. You're going to tell him all the people that have been raped and tortured that he's spoken with 134 times that they don't deserve our help because of a carbon tax? Pierre because 0.03 cents of a fuel dollar, man, I'd give them all the money. That's what good people do. And Pierre Poilievre is not a good person. He is a terrible fucking human being. And anybody that doesn't see our duty to help the people of Ukraine or any marginalized community under brutal attack by a nation of fucking orcs, a nation of terrorists, a nation of fascist, dictatorial assholes that abuse gay men and women, that have a law that says you're allowed to beat your wife, that say they don't have a gay community over there because it's a sin, that send immigrants into the meat grinder just because cannon fodder. My candidate doesn't support that. Pierre Poilievre's candidate does. The Conservative Party of Canada does. The GOP, Republicans of the United States do. Born-again evangelical Christian zealots do. Because Vladimir Putin has somehow fucking convinced them that he is standing up for Christians over there. He's murdering people. 600,000 people have died since this thing has started. 600,000. Year and a half, 600,000. COVID took 50, 60,000 people in Canada. 10 times that in 3 years. 10 times that amount have died. Shot, killed, blown up, raped, murdered, buried alive, hung. And we're not going to continue to help? Yeah, we are. It's our responsibility. Pretty sure that's what Jesus said. And I don't believe in that guy either. Well, I believe he was a philosopher, but he certainly wasn't the Son of Man. But he had some good ideas. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. Anybody who doesn't support those human beings is not worthy of calling themselves Christian, or they really are. There you have it. Have a great day, everybody. Appreciate it. Take these things into account when you're listening to a politician say that's too much money over there. You'd spend more money over here. You know what that money came to? That money was all on paper. In old munitions, equipment we didn't need, want, or have. Stuff we wanted to get rid of. We just sent over there. We don't send big blank checks. We don't send. No one wants Canadian money over there. We don't send skids of cash that was meant for you. That doesn't happen. You just see dollar amounts. You see the word 8 billion. We've sent over 8 billion in mutual aid. 8 billion worth, like training, ongoing training, equipment we're not using, that kind of stuff. Value. We're sending over 8 billion in value. We're not sending 8 billion in your booze money. We're not sending 8 billion in your healthcare money. We're sending things we have, totaling that, and making promises for free trade to rebuild that country by removing barriers to make it easier to help the people of Ukraine who are being systematically murdered by Russia. There's no alternative. None. Zero. No alternative. And anybody who says there is, anybody who calls that a faraway land, we shouldn't have something to do with, look around. Look at the ecosystem we see. Look at the convoy. Look at all those things. Although I will say the convoy people probably hate Ukraine because they're dumb as fuck too. But look around. Grounded the environment. That's not been farmed by Canada. The anti-Canadian shit, that doesn't come from Canadians. It comes through other countries to convince you that this place is a shithole and we need new leadership so they can get Putin's guy. And Pierre Poilievre is Putin's guy. As dictated by Pierre Poilievre's real boss, Stephen Harper, who's very good friends with Vladimir Putin still. And Viktor Orban. Very good friends. Harper made a statement the other day. I'd like closer ties with Viktor Orban. I'd like to be close to him. He's a big fan of mine. I'm a big fan of his. They wish each other happy birthday on Twitter. It's the weirdest shit ever. And some of you guys want to talk about your tax dollars? It's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with the global right who are pure globalists, evil fucking conservative, theocratic globalists that have this cheat code with Stephen Harper's super cool International Democratic Union of other fucking like-minded losers like Boris Johnson, who just got outed as a guy who's like, I don't care how many people COVID kills as long as we can party. He was in fucking court the other day. He just joined the IDU. They all share the same opinion. Fuck you. That's their opinion. Fuck you. Praise God. So I have a duty to warn you. That's what this podcast was all about. Thanks to our friends for making this possible, including our guys over at Cantork, as I open up this delicious beverage. Canada's assembly tool experts making rugged, hardworking, beautiful torque wrenches. They're Canada's leading industrial tool experts. They are the best at sales, service, rentals, calibration, maintenance of custom fab industrial torque tools. No matter the scale of your bolting project, they have your solution. Visit their brand new website, cantork.com, today. Check them out. If you need a torque wrench, heavy machinery, any heavy industry, if you've got a bolting solution that you need a bolting solution for, a bolting problem you need a bolting solution for, they're your people. For heavy industry around the world, he's in Dubai the other day. Send me a text. Hey, I'm in Dubai. What are you doing? Torque wrenches in Dubai. Does them in Canada, proudly Canadian manufactured in Canada. Go to cantork.com today for more information. Brought to you as well by Muse on the Mic. It is a sex-positive body rub parlor. Muse, 1290 Finch Avenue West, and their podcast is great. Advocates for sex work and sex workers. It is Babelicious Bingo from now until December 31st. Get your bingo card, daily draws, daily winners. You can redeem your prizes all week long, and you can also go and visit the ladies, and you can listen to their podcast. We host it, Crier Media. You can also get it anywhere you get your fine podcast. Google, Apple, Spotify, etc. And Muse on the Mic, their Patreon, they have it. If you want to get taken inside the body rub industry, the sex work industry, these are advocates and women that have done an incredible job of getting to the top of the sex work industry mountain. And now they want to give back. And so that's what their podcast is all about. Go and check it out. Muse on the Mic, anywhere you get your fine podcast. Emily and Riley are terrific. And last but not least, brought to you by Ed's Fine Imports and his Gitch. Gitch is your very, very comfortable underwear, by the way. Incredible underwear. Maybe the best underwear you'll ever buy. For me, they are. Big pouch in the front. For Canadians, made for Canadians, by Canadians. Guys are bigger up here. That's what we do. Incredible waistband, very breathable. You're going to love these things. Go to Ed's Fine Imports if you want a pair of the best underwear on the planet, the best pouched boxer briefs in the world. Great waistband, lots of colors. He'll send them to you as well. Gitch3 is your promo code. Use Gitch and then the number 3 when you check out. You'll get a free pair when you buy 3 or more at edsfineimports.com. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks to Alex for popping in today. Thanks to Pierre Poilievre for making this incredibly possible, for being the douchebag he is, so that we can do a show like this. And thank you for taking time out with us. Hopefully it made some sense to you. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye.